Hello and welcome back to CEO.CA's coverage from the Precious Metals Summit at Beaver Creek 2024. I'm excited today to be joined by Adrian O'Brien of Midnight Sun Mining. They trade on the Venture Exchange under the ticker MMA. Adrian, great to have you on the show today.
Great to be back, James.
So how's the conference going for you so far?
Oh, it's phenomenal. Yeah, great show, great turnout. I mean, we've been super busy, back-to-back meetings every day, which is exactly the way we want it.
Absolutely.
And it's really giving us a sense of how well this project is being received and how much attention it's getting. There's no better place to find out, boots on the ground, what kind of attention the project's getting than Beaver Creek. So yeah, phenomenal.
Fantastic. Well, glad to hear it's been busy for you. Always a good sign.
Yes, it is.
Let's kick things off for people who might not be familiar with Midnight Sun. Sure. Give us 30-second elevator pitch. What are the key facts people need to know?
Totally. So we're in Zambia, first off, which, the Zambia copper production side of things is well known, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a new story. When you look at Zambia, you have First Quantum, Barrick, Rio Tinto, Anglo, Ivanhoe is in the DRC just above the area we're working in. And the reality is this is one of the absolute top spots, if not the top spot in the world right now for copper exploration. There's a reason for that, and it's geologically. If you look at this region that we're in, which is called the Domes region, pretty well every deposit is 1 billion tons.
Yeah.
So if you want critical mass, you want projects that can be built, you want projects that can actually have a global impact, they need to be shallow, they need to be big, and they need to be high grade. Zambia has all of that. And so there's kind of a traditional Zambian Congo copper belt that's well known, dozens of deposits. And then there's something called the Domes region. And our project is absolutely smack in the middle of the Domes region. And we're absolutely surrounded by all of the biggest copper producers in Zambia. So we have First Quantum's Kansanshi mine is 6 kilometers away.
Okay.
That's their flagship asset. 1 billion tons at 0.66. Very, very high grade. Then on the west side of our project, we have Barrick's Lumwana mine. That is also the epicenter of Barrick's claim to being a major copper producer. Then we have Ivanhoe's Kamoa-Kakula, slightly large deposit, 1.4 billion tons at almost 3% copper. Incredible. I mean, absolutely astronomical. China Molybdenum's Tenke deposits right above us. And if you go a little further to the west, you find First Quantum's Sentinel mine, which again is 1 billion tons at 0.51. So these are big, world-class, top-of-the-line deposits. Kansanshi, though, which is right next to us, is, of course, Zambia's biggest copper mine, and it's Africa's #1 producer. So we are literally surrounded by the biggest mines. We're in the right place. And we're developing one project, but two different aspects of our project. And so we're working with Cobalt Metals, which most people know more for their investors than some of their projects. But Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson.
Yeah, somebody grabbing the headlines.
Totally. Anderson Horowitz, though. I think what's really important there is you've got Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is Bill Gates' fund. But then they've got things, like I said, Anderson Horowitz. They've got Canadian Pension Plan. I mean, they have top-tier investors, but for a good reason. They've built the ultimate geological team. They have a new approach that's technologically very advanced, and they're aggressive about getting projects developed. So they're actually funding the development of our top target, which is called Dumbwa.
Yeah.
Features a 20-kilometer long soil anomaly that's 0.73% copper in soil, which is astronomical, very high grade. It has a vegetation kill zone over top of that, which indicates that there's some kind of a large sediment system that's causing soil toxicity.
Yeah.
So it's a super exciting target. And then we're working with First Quantum to provide feed source for their oxide SXEW circuit at the Kansanshi mine next door to us.
Okay.
And that could be a very near-term cash flow situation for Midnight Sun, which will completely change the face of where our company is and what we look like going forward.
Yeah, very interesting.
So that's there's your elevator pitch, but there's a lot of detail we can dig into.
Yeah, I mean, lots to talk about. Maybe let's start with Cobalt.
Sure.
How did that deal come about? What did they see in Midnight Sun that made this partnership possible?
Sure.
And what work are they doing in the moment?
Okay, I'm going to tell you my favorite story because I think this speaks so strongly towards the real value of this project. So Cobalt has a geologist involved, PhD geologist. He's one of the best known in the industry. His name's David Broughton. Dr. David Broughton, absolutely phenomenal stratabound and SEDEX copper type geologist. And he's been working in the Domes region. He's been working in sub-Saharan Africa since the Freeport-McMoran days. So Freeport pulled out 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Pulled out of Africa completely. David's been there ever since. And David was at Ivanhoe. But David is credited with the discovery of Kamoa-Kakula and Kansanshi and all the development work that Cyprus did at Kansanshi. So arguably the two biggest deposits in the region. David came to us 8 years ago. We happened to meet up with him. We went and had a lunch. And again, I love this story. And actually, Daniel Edgerton from Cobalt told the story from their perspective at the Electric Metals Transition Conference in Washington a little while ago. We finished up with lunch, and David was sitting there with us, and he said, look, I don't know how you guys got this deposit. I really don't know how you pulled this off. This is an area dominated by majors, and somehow you managed to get this, or I shouldn't say deposit, project.
Yeah.
How did you get this project? And, we explained how we ended up with it through an option agreement. He said, look, whatever you do, sell your house, sell your kids, do what you need to do. This is one of the best projects in Zambia. This is a tier 1 target. Hang on to this thing. It's a very valuable grab, and you need to see it through. That was 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. David eventually, of course, he was with Ivanhoe until a couple of years ago. David he went over to Cobalt, left Ivanhoe, ended up at Cobalt as their chief copper geologist. And the first thing he did was recommend that Dumbwa be a target of a deal with Cobalt. And so brought everything back around. There was also a discovery hole made by a major very close to our property on the southern tip of our soil anomaly that I mentioned. And that was a very, very big intercept, and that got all kinds of attention going. So Cobalt came into the fold, took a lot of months to get a deal done. Yeah. It was worth every minute of it. We have a great deal in place with them, $15.5 million in exploration over 4.5 years. And we've got the ultimate geological team working there, not just David, but the team they have behind him. They have something like 200 geoscientists working for them. You could not have a better team doing this.
Yeah, a lot of copper expertise there. So I'm sure it's a big help in advancing it. I guess I want to actually touch on there. You said you acquired the property through an option agreement. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. So this project used to actually be owned. All the claims that we have were once owned by First Quantum.
Okay.
So if you wind the clock back to when First Quantum was first working in this area, they were developing Kansanshi. And at that time, they had 15 licenses. And the Zambian government was introducing a use it or lose it rule, which is what we call it. But basically, you have to shed property as you go forth.
Yeah.
If you're not actively exploring, they want people to be actively exploring, so they encourage you to drop a percentage of property. At that time, First Quantum had 15 licenses, I believe, and I could be off on these numbers, but they're my understanding. And they were told that they needed to reduce it to 5. So they had to pick some ground to drop, and of course, they're working above us or to the side of us on Kansanshi. And so this was the ground they chose to let go. But they'd done a lot of work there, and they knew the property well. So that was picked up by a private entity, and we optioned it from that private entity over 12 years ago.
Okay.
So we've been there for a long time.
Great. And I guess, over that 12-year period, walk us through maybe a brief history of the work that's been done there and how you've been involved to the project.
Absolutely. Well, so if you can imagine over the last 12 years, copper markets, copper prices, the general junior markets, not an easy time to move a project like this forward. And it's very large, and this is 500 square kilometers, right? So we need, when you look at these targets and you look at the size of the property, you need a big systematic approach to move it forward. You need a good market behind you. You need the wind in your sails, if you will, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have any of that. We had terrible copper prices. We had horrible markets. This was literally the worst time to be moving a project like this forward.
Yeah.
So what we did was we raised everything we could. We put it in the ground and we moved the project forward. We marched it forward step by step, did as much work as we could do, and we just kept grinding it forward. And we knew that eventually we would end up in a position where the markets aligned, the copper price would come together. And I always say in every presentation I do, timing is everything, right? Mm-hmm. The timing for this project is now. And luckily, we'd done enough work, but we had bona fide discoveries on our property, and not just on our property, but on every one of our licenses that we had worked on to develop these big sediment-hosted targets. We had found high-grade oxide copper at surface. We'd intercepted it drilling. We always knew that would be a piece of the puzzle, but we didn't know when, and we didn't know quite how.
Yeah.
But we just kept marching it ahead, and now all of a sudden, wind back the clock 18 months, and everything came into view. Everything came together at the same time, and we were able to put a plan together, a strategy together, and bring in the right partnerships now to drive us to the finish line. So here we are.
Okay, fantastic. Well, very exciting history of the project there. Can you tell us a bit more about the Me Too and Kaziba project?
Yeah, so let's look at the project in two different ways, right? Yeah. You have oxide copper and you have these big sediment-hosted targets, and that's really the key. So you have 500 square kilometer project that's broken up into 4 pieces. Okay, so you've got Kaziba, which is in the northwest corner of our property. Yeah. You have Me Too, which is in the southwest corner of our property. You have Dumbo, which will go with Cobalt, on the southeast corner of our property, and then something in the middle called Crunch. Crunch is a less developed project, so it's more geophysically based. But the oxide copper that we have at Kaziba and Me Too, was something that we kept running into during exploration programs.
Okay.
And when you look at the underlying sediment targets, they need a lot of work. Right? These are complicated. These are great big systems. They're very complicated. And while we were out there working, we kept running into these really high-grade copper intercepts. And we're talking 12, 13, 14 meters of anywhere from 0.6 to 1, 2, 3% copper. Very high-grade, notable, right from surface. And, we knew that there was an opportunity to do something there, but we never knew when it would really come into play and when we would do it. And that kind of changed over the last while due to our proximity to Kansanshi. So you understand, of course, Kansanshi is one of the most impressive copper deposits and impressive copper mines on the planet.
Yeah.
Africa's top producer. And they have, to understand what they do, they have 3 circuits at their mine. They have a sulfide circuit, they have a mixed ore circuit, and they have an oxide SXEW circuit. They also have one of the most efficient copper smelters on the planet. And well, that smelter throws out about 1.3 million tons or 1.2 million tons of sulfuric acid a year. Well, that's an environmental liability, and they need to get rid of it. They need to get rid of it in situ, though. There's no local market. You can't ship it out, can't truck it. The realistic way to deal with it, it has to be something at site. And 20 years ago or more, they figured out that they could heap leach copper oxides, and not only would they be able to neutralize the acid, but they would unlock copper that they could concentrate and sell as a byproduct.
Right.
And they have a huge revenue stream from that. And somewhere in the range of 200 to 400 million, so per year. And so as they've gone forward, they have depleted their oxide resources, which they made public, maybe a year ago or so. And in our conversations with them last spring, they made it clear that they were out of oxides. They made it clear that they needed to find a new source, and that our property had a source that could probably help them out. And so we're working together at both Kaziba and Mitu to advance 2 areas that we have very large targets, high grade, at surface, 0 strip. Then when I say high grade, we're looking at maybe 1.2 to 1.3% average from the 31 drill holes we have at Kaziba.
Yeah.
Something in the range of 0.8% copper equivalent down at Mitu, based on the drilling that we've done down there. And we think we can build resources at both of those targets that will give probably a 5 to 10 year runway to First Quantum for oxide resources at Kansanshi. And so we're working together under a cooperative exploration plan to go out and do that work. And what that looks like is basically Midnight Sun will do the drilling. We're funding that. We raised 10 million last spring. We're funded to do it. We're going to carry out drilling at Mitu and Kaziba, and we're going to build out those resources. And we're going to have all kinds of help from First Quantum. So they're providing a geological team, an engineering team. They're doing assaying and metallurgical testing at Kansanshi, and they have a proper lab on site. So that's going to save us a lot of overhead. It's going to save us a lot of time. Their engineering team is helping us whittle down that program and get it to a really refined program that will give them exactly the amount of information that they need to be able to say that that resource works for them or those numbers work for them, and that they can get that material into production. So we could see material from our property in production as quickly as 12 months from now, assuming everything works. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, really interesting synergies there, I guess, being in proximity to such significant infrastructure. And it's an enviable position for a lot of exploration stories out there.
It's very rare. And you hear a lot of companies talking about toll mining and things like that. This is not a case like that. This is something that, due to our location and our proximity and this material that is on our property, we're in an absolutely perfect position to work with First Quantum to help them, and at the same time unlock really serious cash flow for Midnight Sun that's significant. That could be literally a game changer for us. While we're working on these big sediment hosted targets, and anything we're doing with First Quantum is separate, far and above the sediment hosted targets that are underneath those oxide blankets. So this is icing on the cake, really, if you look at it that way. And so we're still going to move those sediment targets forward. And on top of that, working with Cobalt on the big target at Dumbwa.
Yeah, so I guess lots to be paying attention to, lots of pieces of the puzzle.
Lots of this.
Looking ahead, you said if everything goes smoothly, around 12 months until maybe that we're starting to see results from that oxide program. What are some milestones that people can look out for that that timeline is on track? And I guess at the same time, over the next 12 months, what can we expect in terms of updates from some of these other operations?
I think it's pretty simplistic. Everybody's been looking at what we're doing. We've talked quite a bit about our plan for these oxides. We've talked quite a bit about our plan for Dumbwa, of course, with Cobalt. The big thing now is drilling. Right? So we need to get drilling. We need to get working. Everybody's waiting. It's taken longer to get started than we hoped. But that's just the reality. I mean, we need to do the right work. The other thing is, we've been working with First Quantum very closely, and we wanted that input. We don't want to go out there and do work we don't need to do.
Yeah.
We don't want to spend money we don't need to. We don't want to do work that isn't going to benefit their overall need for this material. So we've worked closely with them. We've defined a plan that's really aggressive. It's great. It's going to get us where we need to go. And that now has put us in a position to start drilling. So we're hoping to be able to announce drill programs at Kaziba, at Me2, and Cobalts program at Dumbwa very quickly. So we're chomping at the bit to get those announced, but those are the big catalysts now. Let's get drilling, let's get the results flowing, and make this an exciting end of the year for the rest of 2024 for us. And then going forward, we just keep building these things out and keep building the case for Midnight Sun.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of near-term catalysts and some things maybe a little further down the line to get excited about.
Absolutely.
Just to wrap up, I guess we've spoken on some of the unique characteristics of the Midnight Sun story, but
yes,
for a retail investor, somebody who might be looking at getting exposure to the copper market through a junior, why should they be paying attention to Midnight Sun, and why is now the right time?
I like to talk about the thesis for copper in general, right? Electrification. At the end of the day, it comes down to manufacturing, comes down to EVs, it comes down to AI data centers, and the need for copper. I don't think I need to belabor that point. I mean, it's well known. The case for copper is well known. But when you look at the global copper exploration world and you look at copper production, there are very few new projects coming on stream. Very few, a handful at best. Those projects have long runways to production, maybe 5 years, maybe even 10 in some cases that I know of. So they're very, very far out. There's very few near-term producers that are in line now to come online. And if you look at what the world is seeing as far as exploration projects, most of what I refer to as the low-hanging fruit has been picked. Okay, so people are looking at porphyry deposits in various jurisdictions, some of which are very tough places to work. Zambia is a great place to work. It's very easy. If you find a major deposit in Zambia, it's going to be built. And when you look at other jurisdictions and you look at porphyry deposits, you're looking at projects that have capex that are way beyond what a junior could ever dream of. Maybe they're 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion in some cases. And not just that, the easy porphyry deposits have been found. They're shallow, they're easy to mine and build, and they have a simplistic plan. So now people are looking at projects that are extremely deep. And they might be really high grade. In a lot of cases, they have great grade. They might be fairly large, but they're very deep. And people are talking about block cave models. Well, if you're talking block cave, if your capex is 2 or 3 billion, now it's 2 or 3 billion in year one.
Yeah.
I mean, how many juniors can swallow that, right? Very, very difficult. So, you have to look at the right jurisdiction. You have to be in the right place. It has to be the right type of deposit. I would argue that stratabound deposits, such as the ones we're looking at, are exactly the type of deposits people should be looking for. In the case of Dumbwa, for example, or you could look at Lumwana, which is, of course, a fantastic deposit owned by Barrick right beside us. Our COO is a guy named Kevin Bonnell, and I'm digressing a little bit here, but our COO is Kevin Bonnell. Kevin Bonnell worked with David Broughton with Freeport-McMoRan for a lot of years. He went to Barrick and was parachuted in by Barrick after the acquisition of Lumwana, which was at that time a Tier 2 asset, and he was tasked with turning it into a Tier 1 asset. Mm-hmm. In 2 years, Kevin got to work at Lumwana. He found that there was a north-south trending structure, so was Dumbwa. These deposits typically sit, in the case of Lumwana, at about 100 meters depth, and they dip a little bit, maybe 15 degrees to the east, which is what they see at Lumwana. But that's shallow. 100 meters is nothing. These are open pit, they're easy. And what you see with stratabound deposits, unlike other more complicated copper deposits, is if you can imagine, it's a flat-lying layer of material between 10 and 15 meters thick that continues along strike for kilometers. So when you find it, it's easy to continue and it's easy to build a mine plan, and the economics of these are fantastic. So I would say that timing is everything. We've got a copper price in our favor. We have overwhelming demand like we've never seen in decades. And at the same time, you want to be in a jurisdiction where you can build it, and you want a deposit where the economics absolutely make sense. And in that case, Zambia and the Domes region of Zambia is literally the top place in the world to be. So we're lucky to be there.
Fantastic. Well, Adrian, lots of exciting things in store for Midnight Sun. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Anytime. Appreciate it.